Here are three prominent parables from the Bible, offering profound lessons on morality and compassion that you definitely shouldn't miss. The Lost Sheep. Once upon a time, in the lush hillsides of ancient Judea, there lived a kind and devoted shepherd. He was a man of gentle spirit, known far and wide for the love and care he bestowed upon his flock. Every morning, as the sun rose and bathed the fields in golden light, the shepherd would lead his sheep out into the open pastures where they could graze freely. The green meadows stretched far and wide, and his flock, consisting of 100 sheep, followed him faithfully wherever he went. Each sheep was precious to the shepherd, not just because of their wool or value, but because he knew each one by name. He had raised them since they were lambs, nurturing them, protecting them from harm, and guiding them to safe pastures. He was their protector, their guide, and they trusted him completely. One afternoon, as the shepherd counted his flock after a long day of grazing, he suddenly realized something troubling. As he went through the familiar faces of his sheep, he found that one was missing. He counted again, but still, the result was the same. 99 sheep stood before him, but the 100th was nowhere to be found. This missing sheep, he remembered, had always been a bit more curious than the others. It had a habit of wandering off, exploring the edges of the pasture, and straying a little too far from the safety of the flock. Today, it seemed that this sheep's curiosity had led it astray, and it had become lost in the vast wilderness. The shepherd's heart was filled with concern. He knew the dangers that lurked in the wild, the steep cliffs, the thorny bushes, and the predators that roamed the night. The thought of his beloved sheep being alone and frightened in such a dangerous place pained him deeply. Without a moment's hesitation, the shepherd made a decision. Though he had 99 sheep safely gathered in the fold, he would not rest until he found the one that was lost. Leaving the 99 in the care of other shepherds, he set out into the wilderness as the sun began to set. The hillsides were rugged and treacherous, the path unclear, but the shepherd pressed on. His love for the lost sheep burned within him, driving him to search every nook and cranny. He called out its name into the gathering darkness, hoping to hear the familiar bleat in response. The sky turned from gold to deep purple, and still, he pressed on, unafraid of the night or the dangers that might come. As he wandered, he thought of the sheep's fear, of how lost and vulnerable it must feel, separated from its family and the safety of the fold. The shepherd's determination only grew. He knew that each of his sheep was of immense value, and he would not let even one slip away. The wilderness was not kind. As the night deepened, the shepherd's path became more difficult. The moon offered little light, and every shadow seemed to hide a new danger. There were steep cliffs that could easily trap a wandering sheep, and thick brambles that could ensnare it. Worse still, the wilderness was home to wild animals, wolves and other predators that prowled the night, always looking for easy prey. But none of these dangers could deter the shepherd. He climbed over rocky hills, pushing through thorny bushes that scratched at his skin. He called out again and again, his voice filled with hope and love. At last, after hours of searching, the shepherd heard a faint sound in the distance, a soft, desperate bleating. His heart leapt with hope. He followed the sound through the darkness, carefully making his way toward the source of the cry. There, tangled in a thicket of thorns, was his lost sheep, trembling and weak, its wool caught in the brambles. The shepherd's heart overflowed with joy at the sight of his sheep. It was tired and scared, but it was alive. With great care, the shepherd reached down and gently freed the sheep from the thorns. He spoke soothingly to it, calming its fears, and lifted it onto his shoulders. Though the sheep was heavy, the shepherd felt no burden. His heart was light with the happiness of reunion. With the sheep safe in his arms, the shepherd began the long journey back home. He carried it through the wilderness, over the hills and valleys, never complaining, never stopping to rest. His only thought was to bring his lost sheep back to the safety of the fold. When he finally returned to his village, the shepherd did not keep his joy to himself. Instead, he called out to his neighbors and friends, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my lost sheep." They all gathered around, celebrating the shepherd's success. The joy of the shepherd was shared by all, for they understood how much this one sheep meant to him. This simple yet profound parable teaches a beautiful lesson about love, compassion, and the value of every soul. Just as the shepherd would not abandon even one sheep, so too does God not forsake even one of his children. Each person, no matter how far they may have wandered, is precious in his sight. No matter how lost we may feel, no matter how far we may stray, God is always searching for us, calling us back with love and open arms. His love is relentless, and he will not rest until we are safe in his embrace. Like the shepherd in the story, God rejoices when even one lost soul returns to him. The lesson from the parable of the lost sheep is one of profound love, compassion, and the inherent value of every individual. At its core, the story teaches us that no one is beyond redemption, no matter how far they may have wandered or how lost they may feel. Like the shepherd who leaves behind the 99 sheep to search for the one that is missing, God, or any person of compassion, will go to great lengths to bring back those who have strayed. This reflects a love that is unconditional, patient, and never gives up on the lost. It is a reminder that each of us is precious, and our mistakes or missteps do not define our worth. This parable also emphasizes the importance of individual care and attention. In a world that often values the majority, the collective, or the strongest, the story reminds us that every life has significance. The shepherd does not abandon the lost sheep or deem it unworthy of rescue just because he has many others. Instead, he demonstrates that true compassion is about seeking out those who are vulnerable and extending a hand to them. This speaks to the larger values of empathy and personal responsibility in communities, urging us to take notice of those who may be struggling or isolated and to reach out to them. Furthermore, the parable teaches that love and joy are found in reconciliation and forgiveness. When the shepherd finds the lost sheep, he does not reprimand or punish it for wandering away, rather, he rejoices and celebrates its return. This mirrors the idea that true love is forgiving and focused on healing rather than condemnation. It encourages us to practice forgiveness in our own lives, not holding grudges against those who may have made mistakes, but instead welcoming them back with open arms. In a broader sense, this parable teaches the value of perseverance. The shepherd's tireless search through dangerous terrain to find the lost sheep is a symbol of the determination and resilience that love often requires. Whether it is in our relationships, our personal growth, or in the efforts we make to help others, this story reminds us that enduring through hardship is often necessary to achieve something truly meaningful. It reinforces the message that struggles and setbacks are not failures, but opportunities for growth and reunion. Ultimately, the parable of the lost sheep reminds us that love, compassion, and empathy should be at the heart of our actions. It calls on us to value every individual, seek out those in need, practice forgiveness, and persevere in the face of challenges. Whether applied spiritually or in daily life, this story is a timeless reminder of the power of love and the importance of caring for one another. The Lost Coin. In a small, humble village long ago, there lived a poor woman who valued everything she possessed, for she had very little in terms of wealth. Her home was modest, a small, single-room house with a dirt floor and only a few belongings. Every day, she worked hard to maintain her household, taking great care in managing the small resources she had. Though she did not have much, she had one possession of particular value, a set of 10 silver coins. Each coin was precious to her, representing not just monetary value but also security for her future. These coins were more than just money. In many cultures of that time, a collection of coins could represent a dowry, a sign of a woman's financial stability and independence. Losing even one of these coins would be a significant loss, both financially and emotionally. One day, as she went about her daily chores, the woman decided to count her coins. She opened the small pouch where she kept them, expecting to see the familiar shine of all 10 silver coins. But to her shock and dismay, when she spread them out in her hand, there were only 9. One coin was missing. Her heart sank. That missing coin was not just a trivial loss, it was a significant portion of her wealth. Losing it meant that she was now one step closer to poverty, to insecurity, and to uncertainty about the future. Panic began to rise within her. How could she have let it slip away? Where could it be? She quickly retraced her steps, trying to recall when she last had all 10 coins. Had she dropped it in her home? Could it have rolled into a corner, hidden in the shadows? Or worse, could it have been lost outside, never to be found again? The more she thought about it, the more desperate she became. She knew she had to find that coin, no matter what it took. Without wasting a moment, the woman lit a lamp. In those days, homes often had few windows, and the inside of her house was dim and shadowy, even during the day. With the small flame casting flickering light around the room, she began to sweep the floor carefully, hoping to uncover the lost coin. Her home was simple, but the dirt floor and the small crevices in the walls made the search difficult. She moved methodically, starting from one corner and slowly working her way across the room. Every inch of the floor was carefully swept, and she examined every spot where the coin could have possibly rolled or fallen. As she worked, her thoughts were consumed by the coin. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the feeling of wholeness, of completeness. Those 10 coins represented something more than material wealth. They were a symbol of her hard work, her care, and her diligence. Losing one of them felt like losing a piece of herself. She searched with unwavering determination, checking every nook and cranny, every dark corner of the room. Her eyes strained in the dim light, and sweat formed on her brow as she bent low, scanning the ground, looking for any glint of silver. Finally, after what felt like hours of searching, something caught her eye, a small, faint gleam of silver in the corner of the room, half buried in the dirt. Her heart leaped with hope as she reached out, brushing away the dust to reveal her missing coin. It was there, just as she had hoped. The woman held the coin in her hands, her heart filled with relief and overwhelming joy. It was just one coin, but to her, it meant everything. She had found what was lost, and now her set of coins was complete again. She felt a sense of triumph, not only because she had regained her wealth but because her hard work, her persistence, had paid off. But the woman's joy was too great to keep to herself. She could not contain her happiness. She rushed out of her house and called to her friends and neighbors, eager to share the good news with them. "Rejoice with me," she cried, her voice filled with excitement. "I have found the coin that was lost." Her friends and neighbors, understanding the significance of the lost coin, gathered around to celebrate with her. They shared in her happiness, knowing how much it meant to her to recover something so valuable. The entire village rejoiced in her discovery, and the woman's heart was light with gratitude and joy. Though this parable is a simple story, it carries a profound message about the nature of love, value, and the pursuit of what is lost. Jesus told this parable to illustrate the immense joy and celebration that occurs in heaven when even one sinner repents and returns to God. In this parable, the lost coin represents a person who has strayed away from God's love, someone who has become lost in the distractions or difficulties of life. The woman, who represents God, does not give up on what is lost. Instead, she searches tirelessly, with great care and attention, to recover that which has gone astray. Her actions are driven by love, not just for the coin itself, but for the completeness and wholeness that comes from bringing it back. This story teaches us that every individual is precious in the eyes of God. Just as the woman did not stop searching until she found the coin, so too does God seek out each of us, no matter how lost we may feel. His love is relentless, and He rejoices when we are found. The parable reassures us that no one is too far gone or too lost to be brought back into the fold. It also emphasizes the importance of persistence and determination. The woman's careful search is a reminder that finding what is lost often requires patience and effort. It is a metaphor for the spiritual journey, one that may involve challenges and struggles, but ultimately leads to great joy when what was lost is recovered. Finally, the celebration at the end of the story reflects the boundless joy that comes with reconciliation and redemption. When the lost are found, it is not a moment for punishment or reproach, but for celebration. In this way, the parable of the lost coin echoes the themes of grace, forgiveness, and the infinite value of every soul. The prodigal son. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a wealthy and kind-hearted man who had 2 sons. This man loved his children deeply and had worked all his life to provide them with a comfortable life. His estate was vast, filled with livestock, servants, and fruitful land. He was known in the village as a generous and fair man, treating everyone with dignity and respect. The 2 sons, who were very different in temperament, lived with their father. The elder son was dutiful and responsible. He worked hard on the family estate, overseeing the land and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. He was loyal to his father and followed his guidance with diligence. The younger son, however, was more restless. He longed for excitement and freedom. Though he loved his family, he felt constrained by the routine of life on the estate. He dreamed of adventure, of exploring distant lands, and of living life on his own terms. He grew increasingly impatient, believing that life outside his father's home was far more thrilling than the life he currently lived. One day, the younger son made a bold and shocking request. He went to his father and said, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance that is coming to me." In those times, asking for one's inheritance before the death of a parent was seen as highly disrespectful. It was as though the son was saying he could not wait for his father to pass away. Nevertheless, the father, full of love and understanding, did not rebuke his son. Instead, he divided his property between his 2 sons, giving the younger son his portion of the inheritance, just as he had asked. With great excitement, the younger son gathered his newfound wealth, packed his belongings, and left his father's home. He set off for a distant country, eager to live a life of freedom, far from the watchful eyes of his family. In the foreign land, the younger son quickly found himself immersed in a world of luxury and indulgence. With the money from his inheritance, he surrounded himself with extravagant pleasures, fine clothes, rich food, lavish parties, and new friends. He lived without restraint, spending his fortune on every whim and desire. Wherever he went, he was celebrated for his wealth, and many people flocked to be in his company. But the younger son's extravagant lifestyle came at a cost. He did not consider the consequences of his actions, nor did he think about the future. Little by little, his wealth dwindled. His friends, who had enjoyed the benefits of his generosity, began to drift away as his money ran out. His life of luxury and excess was quickly coming to an end. Then, to make matters worse, a great famine struck the land. The abundance that had once surrounded him disappeared. The cost of food and shelter skyrocketed, and the younger son found himself destitute and alone. He had nothing left, no money, no friends, and no means to support himself. Desperate and starving, the younger son searched for any work he could find. Eventually, he found a job with a local farmer, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. This was a humiliating task, especially for a young man who had once lived in luxury. In his culture, pigs were considered unclean animals, and to be reduced to feeding them was a sign of utter disgrace. But the younger son had no choice, he needed to survive. As he toiled in the mud, feeding the pigs, his hunger grew unbearable. He was so famished that he longed to eat the food the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. His clothes were tattered, his body thin and weak, and he was covered in dirt. He had fallen as low as one could go. In his misery, the younger son began to reflect on his life. He thought of his father's house, the warm meals, the comfortable bed, and the love and care he had taken for granted. Even the hired servants in his father's house, he realized, were treated better than he was now. They had more than enough food to eat and a roof over their heads, while he was starving in a foreign land. At that moment, the younger son came to his senses. He realized the folly of his ways, the reckless decisions that had brought him to ruin. Filled with regret, he said to himself, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, make me like one of your hired servants.'" With a humbled heart, the younger son resolved to return home, not as a son, but as a servant. He knew he had wronged his father deeply, but he hoped that perhaps his father would show him mercy and allow him to work for him. The journey back home was long and filled with uncertainty. The younger son had no idea how his father would react. Would his father reject him? Would he be too ashamed to take him back? These questions weighed heavily on his heart as he made his way toward his father's estate. But as he approached the estate, something incredible happened. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. The father, who had been watching and waiting for his son's return, recognized him immediately. Filled with compassion, the father did not wait for his son to reach the house. Instead, he ran to him, his arms open wide, his heart overflowing with love. When the father reached his son, he embraced him tightly and kissed him. The younger son, overwhelmed with emotion, began to speak the words he had rehearsed. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But before he could continue, his father interrupted him. The father turned to his servants and said, "Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again, he was lost and is found." The father's joy knew no bounds. He welcomed his son back, not as a servant, but as a beloved child. The entire household began to prepare for the great feast. There was music, dancing, and laughter. The father had found his lost son, and his heart was filled with gratitude and joy. Meanwhile, the elder son was working in the fields when he heard the sounds of celebration coming from the house. Confused, he asked one of the servants what was happening. The servant replied, "Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." Upon hearing this, the elder son became angry and refused to go inside. He felt a deep sense of injustice. He had stayed by his father's side, working faithfully all those years, while his younger brother had squandered his inheritance and brought disgrace to the family. And now, instead of punishment, his brother was being celebrated with a feast. Seeing his elder son's anger, the father came out and pleaded with him. But the elder son said, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." The father, full of love for both his sons, gently replied, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again, he was lost and is found." The parable of the prodigal son is a powerful story of forgiveness, grace, and unconditional love. The father in the story represents God, whose love for his children is boundless. No matter how far we stray or how many mistakes we make, God is always waiting for us to return to him. The younger son's journey reflects the spiritual path of repentance. He realizes the error of his ways and humbly returns, seeking forgiveness. The father's response is one of overwhelming mercy and joy, showing that God's love is not based on merit, but on grace. This parable teaches that no one is beyond redemption, and that God's arms are always open to those who seek to return. The elder son, meanwhile, represents those who may struggle with self-righteousness or envy. His frustration shows how easy it is to overlook the joy of reconciliation when we focus on fairness rather than love. The father's gentle response reminds us that God's love is not limited, and that we should celebrate the restoration of others as much as we cherish our own blessings. The parable encourages us to show compassion, forgiveness, and love to others, just as the father did for his lost son. After reflecting on these three parables, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son, we are reminded of the boundless love, forgiveness, and compassion that lie at the heart of these stories. Each of these parables carries a profound message about how we, as individuals, are deeply valued, even when we stray or lose our way. Whether we identify with the lost sheep, the misplaced coin, or the prodigal son, the message is clear. No one is beyond redemption, and no mistake is too great to be forgiven. God's love, like the shepherd's, the woman's, and the father's, is patient, relentless, and unconditional. These parables show us that, no matter how lost we may feel or how far we may wander, there is always a way back home. The joy of reconciliation and the celebration of reunion demonstrate that it's never too late to seek forgiveness and to find a place in the arms of a loving God. These stories also remind us of the importance of compassion toward others. Just as God searches for us when we are lost, we, too, are called to seek out and support those around us who may feel alone or forgotten. We are invited to be people of grace, offering love and understanding to others, just as it has been freely given to us. Ultimately, the parables teach us that love, forgiveness, and redemption are always within reach, for ourselves and for those around us. When we embrace these truths, we can live more fully, with hearts open to love and eyes focused on the beauty of reconciliation and grace. Dear listeners, I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen to these three powerful parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. These stories hold timeless lessons of love, redemption, and forgiveness that speak to the core of what it means to be human. I hope that as you listened, you found moments of reflection, comfort, and encouragement. Thank you for opening your hearts to these messages of hope. May they inspire you to embrace forgiveness, show compassion, and never lose sight of the fact that we are all valued and loved, no matter where life takes us. Your presence and attention mean so much, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share these stories with you. Thank you once again, and may peace and love be with you always.